What's up, Vault Hunters? I'm SchviftyFive, and this is Ultimate Vault Hunters. Lucky episode number 7. Triple G is joining us once again with a Moze build designed to beat the odds. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining in the conversation. Whether you're joining us on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, or listening along on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Spotify, we thank you for tuning in and listening to the program. For those of you who want to watch Ultimate Vault Hunters as soon as it goes live, you can hear it first bi-weekly, Thursdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time on Twitch and YouTube. As I mentioned earlier, Triple G is coming back to the program. 2 weeks ago, we featured Psychotic Wolf's take on the former Vladov soldier, but now Triple G steps up to the plate to present his case as to why his Moze build, GT Shorty, is also worthy of the title Ultimate Vault Hunter. Yo, Triple G, how's it going? How you been?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
I'm good. It seems like forever since we talked last.
I know, it's almost like I haven't played with you for the last 5 days in a row.
At least, I don't know, it's been like a week and a half, just all day, every day. I love it.
Yeah. It's nice to see you not propping up the bottom of the leaderboards though.
Oh, wow. It's not my fault that you steal all the kills. It's fine.
It's true.
It's fine.
It's true.
Fine, whatever. It's funny because you stopped playing with me and I had my best game that I've had in weeks.
It's true. I did watch. I witnessed it as well. You did very well.
You did. Thank you. I hear you've been partaking in the red chests.
Yeah, we did red chest this week. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit pessimistic at the start because I saw that it was just the win rate rather than the loot boost. But actually, it turned out way better for like new players and some of the older players as well. People could get specifically what they wanted when they saw it. And we had somebody turn up to the stream who had like this like nerd thing that automatically entered them into each red chest. Like if you were on PC, so like people were entering in and just like grabbing the gear that they wanted at the right time. It was really good.
That's awesome. Because it was 100% win rate, but
yes.
Not all legendaries.
No, not all legendaries, which was quite good actually, because you had like blue shields like the Revengeinator. We didn't get a one-shot shield, which was annoying, but there was some really nice like scatterguns and some other like purples that would turn up now and again.
You get like a cloning manding tracker, some cool stuff like that?
I didn't get one. And the most frustrating part was I was watching a streamer and they had a consecutive hits flipper in radiation. It was beautiful. It was perfect. I selected to be in it and I won it, but I didn't press the button to actually take my item and it randomized it and it gave me like a pistol that was just terrible. So
that's too bad. Well, with the upcoming event, you should have some more luck with that. You get some boss drops soon? Yeah,
targeted farming. So I'll probably be taking myself to Agonizer, which has the harshest drop rates, and seeing if we can get some good stuff from them.
Nice. Are you looking forward to the easy mode mayhem event that's happening too? Yeah?
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely the one that stood out. I think there'll be a lot of players that'll like that in particular.
I think that's going to be really fun. I can't wait to see what they do with that. We have a crazy build to go through today. Are you ready to just like dive deep into this?
Yes. Yes, we are.
All right.
Yeah, so this is GT Shorty. So to give a bit of an explanation on the name, so we did a build a few weeks back that was okay, but it lacked the damage needed to go into the Guardian takedown. So we went back to the kind of drawing board and basically gave the build more damage without trying to take too much survivability away from it. So it's called GT Shorty because GT for Guardian takedown is what we designed it for, and then Shorty because Moze is the shortest character there. And it kind of plays on the word GT40, which is a car that I really liked. So
nice.
The name will do. But essentially, the build is built on the premise of Iron Bear is really powerful when we need it, but when we're out of Iron Bear, we pretty much can't be killed as long as we're doing damage. And we do a ton of damage that's kind of mixed into the elements because we're going to be kind of using one particular anointment next to mags, just pretty much exclusively.
Okay. All right.
So we'll start on the green tree.
Right.
So bottomless mags tree. So the way that the build is going to work, so as I said, we're going to go into Iron Bear, and then when we're out of Iron Bear, that's when we kind of really come alive. So we use the next 2 mags anointment, which is now 100%, which is brilliant, and it will give us a bonus element. So let's, for argument's sake, that is next 2 mags of radiation. So normally on a Vault Hunter, once you've used those next 2 magazines, you've lost that damage. But on Moze, particularly using the green tree, you can use skills like redistribution and the bottom of the capstone skills to make yourself not reload, and therefore you carry that 100% damage all the way through.
Nice.
So that's the kind of premise of the build. So in terms of the green tree, the first 5 points we're going to put into is Cloud of Lead. And what that will mean is occasionally Moze and Iron Best Shot will do it bonus incendiary damage. So that's kind of element number 1. So we have, if we're using a kinetic weapon, we will get bonus incendiary. But if we're using a radiation weapon like a Malawan Flipper, we'll get bonus radiation as well.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
So we've added two elements into the cocktail. And then when you think that we use the anointment for next 2 mags, and that next 2 mags could be cryo, we add a 3rd element into the cocktail. So we don't actually have to switch away weapons to come up against a type of enemy, because we will have an element that's effective against that boss or that particular enemy type without having to swap off weapons. So it's a really lazy build. Like, you just hold your trigger down, never have to reload, never have to swap weapons, and just mow through enemies. It's really cool. So so Cloud of Lead is the first 5 points. Then the next 3 points we will put into Stoke the Embers. This will give us some more incendiary damage. So we took some incendiary damage in the first row. We're taking some more in Stoke the Embers. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to be putting a point into Redistribution. Now, Redistribution is really, really, really powerful. So when we get a critical hit, we're going to be regenerating ammo. Now, there are plenty of weapons available in Borderlands now that give you either multiple pellet or really easy ways to critical hit. So every time we're doing those critical hits, we're going to be giving ammo regeneration. Mm-hmm. This is all going to start building into the fact that we're never going to need to reload our weapon.
Ever?
Ever. Literally ever. You go through the Guardian takedown or the Malawan takedown, and you'll never reload your weapon once. Literally.
Does that take from your reserves, or is that just like generated?
No. This is generated. So you'll never need to use a vending machine again. You'll never use anything.
That's awesome. Yeah. I actually did, when I first did the most recent Guardian takedown, I did that with K6 and stuff, and I ended up the last person alive, and I ran out of ammo. On the second boss, and I was able to take down his health a lot, but I ran out of ammo. I killed him.
Yeah, most solutions are to take a cut burst with you into the takedowns, but with this build, you don't need anything. You literally won't use a single bullet. It's pretty good.
That's awesome.
Then we're going to put some points into Scrappy. So I kind of like the kind of switch mode speed at times, because we're going to be using Malawan flippers for the most part, because it's just such a brilliant weapon, and I'll go into the characteristics of why for that weapon a bit later. But we'll put 4 points into Scrappy now, which will give us some better handling while we're moving, and swap speed and switch mode speed if we need it. And then we're going to be moving into Russian offensive. So one of the main issues with Moze previously was her survivability comes from throwing grenades. So quite a while ago, Gearbox changed Russian offensive so that you could actually heal while you're sprinting and shooting at the same time. So that's one of the aspects of how we heal without actually needing to throw grenades all the time. So we'll put a point here. It does take a little bit of a while to get used to, because Moze looks like she's running faster when she actually isn't. So it does take a little bit of getting used to when you're actually playing it. But once you're used to it, you'll never even notice it. And then we're going to put 5 points into Scorching RPMs, which give us increased fire rate and critical hit damage. So the idea being here is we're going to be trying to aim for critical hits. So we're going to get bonus damage when we critical hit, and we're going to increase the fire rate as well. Because bearing in mind, the fire rate doesn't, the more fire rate, the better, because it doesn't really matter to us, because we're never actually using, or we're never going to expend that magazine. So it's not like we need to tweak down the fire rate because we're just going to constantly be reloading. We're never going to reload, so we can put that as high as we want. And then So the next one is 5 points into the iron bank. This will just increase our magazine size. So you can use kind of what weapons you want, but the idea being that the larger the magazine, if you go back to the redistribution skill, that regenerates ammo at 5% of the magazine. So we want our magazine to be quite high, so that we never get towards the bottom on that one, because then what we've got here, so we're going to skip over click click, won't put points into click click, because this gives you more damage as the ammunition in the magazine depletes, but we're never depleting, so we would be wasting points if we put it into click click. Although it's a really, really good skill, and it does provide quite a fair bit of damage, we're never getting anywhere near that, so we wouldn't use click click. And then we will cap out with forge, which means we will constantly be regenerating ammunition as we go anyway. So this combined with redistribution will just pretty much mean that as long as the magazine's got above 20, you'll never, ever, ever run out of ammunition in that magazine or need to reload.
We did skip over Specialist Bear. You have 1 point in Specialist Bear.
Yes. So basically, two weapons at the same time increase their damage. So we're going to be using the Vanquisher pods for Iron Bear, which are in the blue tree, and we'll use the same one. So we'll get boosted damage off the Vanquisher pods, but I'll go over that when we get to the blue tree.
Fair enough. Cool.
So if we go to the blue tree, which is kind of the next natural possession.
And this is a leveling progression? Like, would you start in the green tree, or is this just like an end game build?
I would go through the green tree personally, because if you're leveling through, ammunition can be quite scarce at the start anyway. And to get healing out of the trees, you kind of have to go all the way down to halfway in the blue tree, and you have to be throwing grenades to get healing. Or you can go halfway down the green tree and you can just run around and get healing. So it's much easier just to run around than it is to throw loads of grenades. So that's what I would personally do. So in terms of the blue tree, then Demolition Woman, I like this tree. It was where all the splash damage and where most of our damage will come from. So we will have +5 in Fire in the Skag's Den, and whenever Moze deals splash damage, she'll deal bonus incendiary damage. So that synergizes nicely with already the incendiary damage we've already got.
Right.
And we're adding to that as well. So it's all starting to become really, really powerful when we deal incendiary damage. Now, because this is an Iron Bear and an outside of Iron Bear build, we're going to be putting 3 points into deadlines, so that when we do want to use Iron Bear, we will use less fuel, and therefore we can stay into it much longer. And then we'll have 3 points in Grizzled, which means that if we ever get into trouble, Iron Bear is kind of used as a crutch, as something we can jump into. So just putting 3 points here, make sure that Iron Bear comes back just at the right amount of time. To be honest with you, as long as you're firing, you're hitting a target, you should never need Iron Bear. But there is those odd occasions where you can just be caught between mobs, or that last mob might just be causing you a bit of trouble. So you can just jump into Iron Bear, and that makes sure you always have that Iron Bear available.
Cool.
Then we have 5 points in the dreaded Torque Cross promotion. So it is a kind of a risk and reward 5 points. So it does make it a significant difference, particularly when you're using radiation weapons, to have bonus splash damage of all those elements, because particularly with radiation, you can make that enemy explode from radiation, which could then make another enemy explode from radiation. So it's really nice to have Torque Cross promotion, but the flip side of that is get you close and you'll start doing damage to yourself.
So no itchy flackers.
yeah, no itchy flackers at all. And then, so 5 points into Stainless Steel Bear. So again, giving our Iron Bear more armor and a maximum fuel of 20%. So it's tougher and it lasts longer, which is pretty self-explanatory. 2 points into Pull the Whole Loop In. So Moze's grenades now have a chance to score critical hits. Now this is really, really good, because if we step back to the green tree where we talked about redistribution, where every single time we hit a critical hit, we regenerate ammo, we've now got a third and additional source of how to regenerate ammunition.
Ooh.
Because this will now make our grenades critical hit. So we only put 2 points in here. We don't need 3. We've got more than enough ammo regen by just putting 2 points in there. But it is nice to have critical hits proc from your grenades. It is a nice thing to have.
Right.
Then we will have 2 points in Vampire. These 2 points, one of them is optional, in my opinion. So this will restore 8% of mission health per enemy hit. So the type of grenade we'll use, which by no shock is the Clouding Management Tracker, which we'll get onto. We're going to be doing enough hits and we'll have our calm that regenerates health. So you potentially will need only 1 point in here. Now, you can put that point in this blue tree wherever you want. You could put it into Auto Bear, which gives you, when you jump out, the Iron Bear will last for an additional 15 seconds. Or you could put it in your grenade capacity. I probably wouldn't put it into grenade capacity because it's going to be pretty full all the time. So if I was pushed, I would probably put it into Auto Bear. And then the final point in the blue tree is Short Fuse, which is extremely powerful, which is whenever Moze deals gun damage, there is a chance of a secondary explosion centered on that target. And we've taught quest promotion and all the other bonus elements that we're firing into there. It's just so much damage. There's just barely anything that can stand in front of you for an extended period of time.
I have a question.
Yep.
So you have Vampire and you also have Redistribution. Is that redundant? Because you already have 2 lifesteal things? Is that something where you could allocate those points then Vampire somewhere else?
So sometimes when you are between mobs, or you might have an enemy in front of you, and you kill that enemy. So say you're in the Malawanda, you kill that enemy, and there's another mob that's over that way. But let's say Pool Party's on the floor and Pool Party's hurting you. So I can't see, I don't have line of sight on the enemy. So technically I'm losing health, but if I've got my grenade giving me health over there from a tracker, that will keep me alive in certain situations. You just might get caught out by Pool Party, or you might get caught out by a barrel, and that just might be enough to keep you alive.
Okay.
So it's more for the health than for the actual health, than for anything else really. But it's just there as a safety net. You could move away if you wanted to, but I would never take the points out of Redistribution because I love that skill.
Yeah. All right. So we have the red tree left?
Yes, the red tree. So this one, there are multiple options in what you do with this tree. So originally when I designed this tree, I would have 5 in armored infantry, which gives us damage reduction and gun damage. But a recent patch has meant that Selfless Vengeance now takes a little bit of health off us, but gives us 3% of gun damage and extends that duration of gun damage for quite some time. So actually, Selfless Vengeance lasts longer and can be more powerful than Security Bear. It's up to the user on how you want to do it personally. What I would do is I would stick with my build and say, put 5 points in armored infantry for that constant 15% damage and put 1 point into Selfless Vengeance so that you have that chance to get those extra 5 seconds of damage. But you could do that the opposite way around and still be quite effective.
Oh, fantastic. So what augments for your action skill do you take?
So technically, we won't use the augments. We'll use the Vanquisher pods for the start. Now, this is just personal preference, but you'll use Vanquisher rocket pods. Now, you could use the active tracking for homing missiles if you struggle to use Iron Bear. But if you don't take the augments and you just use Vanquisher pods on their own, you can fire them faster and more accurately. It just feels much better. So you could go with the active tracking. You could use target softening if you wanted to debuff the enemies. But my personal choice is to not have them because you get a much higher fire rate and then get much more damage.
Interesting. Okay, cool. What would you say the main rotation of this build is?
So the main rotation is realistically, you want to get into your Iron Bear to start with, kill a few mobbing enemies, and then from that point on, if your Iron Bear gets destroyed, you've then got your next 2 magazines that will never run out, so you have that bonus damage constantly. Or if your Iron Bear doesn't get destroyed, you can keep on destroying it until it runs out. So if I'm just starting the Guardian takedown or just starting the Malawan takedown, I'll run in, get into my Iron Bear, start shooting, and then once that Iron Bear is destroyed, it's then completely up to me whenever I use the Iron Bear again. I will never have to reload, and I will constantly have damage, and I will never be able to be killed. So it's up to me when I use Iron Bear, if and when.
So is it dependent on that? You're not ever having to reload, and you're not dying is dependent on getting into Iron Bear first?
No.
No?
The only thing that's dependent on Iron Bear is that extra 100% damage on the anointment of the gun. You could technically use a consecutive hits flipper, and you wouldn't have to use Iron Bear at all if you didn't want to, because consecutive hits won't rely on Iron Bear, and you'll still get all your magazines regen, and you'll still get all your life steal. It's just the next two mags is 100% constantly, whereas consecutive hits, you have to charge consecutive hits up and make sure you're doing constant damage.
So that next two mags just goes on forever because you have one mag.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty cool.
It is very cool.
Oh, what damage builds would you say are out there that could compare in numbers to this build?
So in terms of numbers, so you're not going to fire one rocket and it's going to do 1 billion damage, and that's going to be it. So
Moxie, okay.
Yeah, yeah, not Moxie. I'm not good looking enough for being Moxie. But if you're in terms of constant damage, like, so if you're fighting Wotan, you'll be able to absolutely delete Wotan. You'll be able to absolutely delete Anathema, but you won't do it instantly. But you just can't die. So you just hold the trigger down, and like you could like just look around. You just can't die. So you just absolutely annihilate him. You have the damage. It just is over a constant period of time rather than just instantly one bullet.
Really interesting. Cool. Okay. So while we have you here, how did this build fare overall with the True Guardian takedown?
So this build is designed for the Guardian True Takedown. It's absolutely designed for it. So as I said earlier, we had a build that wasn't quite putting it in the Guardian Takedown. So we took some points away from some of the health regen and put it into the damage, essentially getting us further the way down the blue tree to get to a short fuse. What that meant is we then increased our damage. And then in addition to the patch that came out a few weeks ago, we got some more damage into Selfless Vengeance. So now you can just literally just walk through the Guardian Takedown.
What would you say if I broke it down? Like, what about the crystal activation sections? How does it work there?
So the crystal activation sections, if I struggled with the crystals, so you shouldn't struggle with the crystals. If you use a combination of weapon like the radiation flipper, the damage and the spread effect will kill most of the mobbing around, and you'll kill the enemies fast enough that they won't ever be a problem on the crystals. If you were having a problem with the crystal, I would take 1 point out of Vampire, put it into Auto Bear, and put Auto Bear away from the crystals, and then the enemies will be distracted by Auto Bear, and you can do the crystals quite easily.
Interesting. Okay, what about Anathema?
He's easy as pie. Easy as pie. Hold the trigger down, kill him. Next boss. He's literally easy as pie.
Let's go. Okay, what about Scourge, the Invincible Martyr?
It's pretty much the same. So again, so both Anathema and Scourge have immunity phases, which you have to deal with, and you will be teleported now because you can't skip them. But they're just enemies that you still just hold the trigger down and constantly fire at. So the only thing you would maybe do differently is they have obviously a large armor bar and a large shock bar. So you could, before you start that fight, put on a flipper with a more potent combination of elements. So you can't change the fire because that's with Moze, but you could make it like radiation cryo, which is really good for shields and armor. Or you could just put next to mags corrosive on a corrosive flipper, do all the corrosive to get rid of the armor, and then just switch to a shock one or switch through the fight. Like, it's really simple, but that concoction, my personal favorite of radiation, cryo, and then having the incendiary through Moze's skill trees, everything just gets deleted.
Ooh, this is awesome. That's really cool that you use all the different elements at one time.
Mm-hmm. And in particular, when you consider that Gearbox removed the bonus ASCs from the anointments, Moze is one of the few people that can still have that concoction together.
That's really cool. What would you say this build excels at the most?
Mobbing. So we do boss damage. We can delete Wotan. Like I said, we won't do it in one fight. But as long as you've got enemies in front of you, they'll last about 2 or 3 shots for a badass, and then they'll die. Like, you just walk through enemies, and because it's literally a pick up and play easiest character in the world. You don't have to worry about ammunition. You don't have to worry about your health. You don't have to worry about grenade regen. You just jump into wire bear, jump out, hold the trigger, and just find the next target you're shooting at.
Amazing. I can't wait to use this build. It's going to be great. So about skill tree. This is a question we ask all the time because you never know when we're going to get more points. But if you had 3 more skill points to add to your talent tree, where would they go?
So this would probably depend on what they do with the Mayhem 10 enemy damage. Now, at the moment, the enemies themselves are actually doing Mayhem 10 scaled damage. So they can rip through your shields quite easily, but because of the way the build's set up, they'll never take your health bar. So there's the potential that we actually do a few points, like 3 points into Vladov Ingenuity, which is in the orange tree, which would give us some more shield, which would make us capable of dealing with that damage. That being said, if that's not the case and it actually is fixed, then I would be looking at something like I'd maybe put a point into the blue tree for to the last, which will give us the ability to throw grenades if we ever did go down. Mm-hmm. I would put maybe a point into auto bear, like I said, so then we would definitely be able to deal with the crystals first time, every time. And then I would either put the last point in grizzled, which gives us cooldown rate from the top by killing an enemy, or just get constant cooldown rate from explosive punctuation, which is also towards the bottom of the blue tree.
All right. Fantastic choices. What weapons and gear will you be utilizing in this build?
So my favorite weapon from DLC 3 was the flipper. Now, the flipper is absolutely amazing. So the longer you fire the flipper, it increases the amount of projectiles that it actually fires.
Oh.
It has a really high magazine size. And then when we boost that magazine size even further, we're using Moze's skill tree, because it's Maliwan, it gets 2 elements. So I like to use a radiation cryo so I can flick between the two if need be. I like to have the next 2 mags as the anointment, because that's basically what we're doing. As I said previously, you can use consecutive hits if you want to. Then you don't have to think about jumping in and out of Iron Bear. But next 2 mags is the anointment that I would prefer. And then, so we'll have fire coming through the skill tree, radiation cryo as a combination, and then your anointment can be any flavor you want it to be. So if you're fighting Wotan, technically you could have a corrosive flipper with the next 2 mags being corrosive, meaning you've got 200% corrosive damage, plus the fire damage as well, if you want to constantly. But you can mix that concoction up depending on what you want. In terms of other weapons, you could use the Miscreant. Now, the Miscreant is an extremely powerful Vladov pistol. It has a small magazine size. It's not impossible to use. It does really, really good damage, but you will probably have to feather the trigger in order to keep those next 2 mags up. But it's still really good, or you could use a consecutive hits.
Okay.
The Light Show is probably one of the most go-to weapons in the game now, again from DLC 3. It also has a kind of a medium magazine size, does a lot of projectiles in a circle, and you'll have to feather the trigger a little bit, unlike the flipper. And then the 4th weapon, which is fast becoming my literal favorite gun in Borderlands 3, is the Dakota shotgun. Now, you can only get this weapon by completing DLC 3, and most people, like myself, will probably skim over it because it was given to you at the end of the DLC 3 campaign, and it's just a purple shotgun. And people will be like, oh man, I just got purple out there, not legendary. But if you pick it up, it's absolutely insane. Really? So it's got a hidden ability where it can randomly fire a full set of projectiles in fire or shock. And then you can put the next 2 mags on it as well. So you're already getting fire. So if you have a next 2 mags in radiation, the gun itself absolutely bangs. It's just absolutely brilliant. It synergizes really well with Moze because shotguns do splash damage and Moze buffs splash damage. And because it's a Jacob's rifle, the critical hits ricochet as well. So, and those are splash damage, so it works really well with Moze as well. It's a fantastic shotgun. And if I knew what the shotgun was like before I bought DLC, I would have bought DLC on the shotgun alone.
Really?
It's that good. It's that good.
Wow. I'm going to have to go back and see if I can get that again.
Yeah. I was very fortunate because I did skip over it, but I picked it up and put it in my vault because I'm a hoarder, and I had next 2 mags radiation, so I was very fortunate.
Ooh, that is fortunate, especially with your build.
Yeah.
There are a lot of points that you put into buffing incendiary damage. Is there a preference in your weapon and mod roll selection that pushes more incendiary-based weaponry and mods that increase the percentage of incendiary damage?
So we have a lot of incendiary because that synergizes really well with Moze's skill tree. We don't really need to buff it any further in the artifacts or the class mods. So if we go through our kind of equipment, you can use whatever shield you want to use, essentially, and any anointment that you want to use. So I have action skill end 50% cryo on a transformer. Mm-hmm. Transformer is my favorite shield. It is just so powerful, complete immunity to shock, and the absorb chance. So it's just absolutely brilliant. You could go for a different type of a anointment. So for example, if you wanted movement speed or something like that, you can have that, because Moze doesn't have anything that buffs her movement really in her trees. But the people go for damage. So you want 50% bonus cryo, for example, for 10 seconds. The cloning maddening tracker grenade is very, very important for Moze. It's probably the go-to grenade on pretty much every Moze build. It's probably the most sought after purple grenade that you can get. It's a world drop. You can get it from vending machines, anything like that. And essentially it will split into 2 grenades and then spawn another 3 grenades. So you'll see it flying around everywhere. Now, when we go back to our skill tree and we have our grenades doing critical hits, and we've got lots of grenades because it's split into 5 doing critical hits, which means we've got even more ammo regen, that works out really well for Moze, and we're healing off all those grenade hits as well.
Wow.
So it all kind of like binds together. Now, the anointment I personally love is on grenade thrown. It will buff weapon, grenade, and action skill damage by 25%. So jump out of Iron Bear, throw the odd grenade, and you've just got constant extra 25% damage, for 6 seconds. It's really nice. Really nice. In terms of the class mod, now, one of the reasons why this build has as much survivability as it does is because of this class mod. Now, the class mod is the Sapper. I believe that this is one of the most overlooked class mods in Borderlands. It is super, super, super powerful. So how it works is Moze gains 12% of her lifesteal the longer she holds down the fire button, which synergizes beautifully, considering we're never going to let go of that fire button at all, ever, because our magazine's never going to let go. So as long as we're firing, we can't die. You cannot die from firing. The role that I have is beautiful. I have weapon damage and SMG damage, but any type of damage is nice. You would like, it's just so powerful. You get this from DLC 2, from any named boss that you can farm. Unfortunately, at the moment, if you want the Moze com, you have to farm it with flak, and vice versa, because there's something in the game. Gearbox will probably fix that in the coming weeks. But if you want to farm for this, you need to use flak to get Moze and Moze to get flak. But that's just the way Gearbox works sometimes. So ideally, weapon damage rolls would be nice. You don't really need health damage or shield buffs. We never use those. And then the artifact is the pearl. It's just the go-to. So we're going to be constantly charging up the pearl all the time from our grenades going off. We're constantly dealing elemental damage, so we'll have dot damage going off, and then we're constantly holding the trigger, so we'll have that going off. So I have a magazine size, which works well with the build, and then a fire rate, which works well with the build. There are some other options that are floating around for the pearl. If you didn't have the pearl and didn't have access to the DLCs, a victory rush would work pretty nicely. You'd probably want to roll, if you're going to use the flipper, SMG damage, or if you're going to use a pistol damage, because you're going to need to make up for some of that damage. That being said, I'd be really confident that you would still be able to do the Guardian takedown without the pearl. If there are some of people out there that don't have the DLCs, a weapon that I would recommend would either be a hyper focus, which has just been buffed, a hell shock, which is extremely, extremely powerful.
One of Mitsu's favorites.
One of Mitsu's favorites, yeah. Or the bitch SMG, that has an extremely high magazine size and has also been buffed. So those are non-DLC weapons that you will potentially be able to use that are really, really good.
Great. I know you went over some of them, but what anointments, especially for weapons, should players aim for?
So the premise of this build is obviously for the next 2 mags anointment.
Right.
The next 2 mags anointment is absolutely brilliant. You could, because you're a Moze player, use the next 2 mags 125% incendiary. So that's a different anointment, works exactly the same way, technically gives you another 25% damage from that anointment. If you're going to fight Grave Ward and use a fire flipper with that anointment, he isn't going to last very long at all because he's weak to fire. You could use the 160% splash as well, which will work. Now, that won't buff the flipper itself, but it will buff the torque cross promotion and the short fuse and things like that.
Okay.
And consecutive hits is a really good one. So the consecutive hits, again, you'll have to keep it charged, but it will do up to 150% damage, which is technically more than the next 2 mags. However, you don't have that constantly. You have to keep that charged.
Right.
So the premise of this build being it's kind of a lazy build where you don't really have to think. With the consecutive hits, that doesn't really play into that because you'd have to make sure that it's charged, and you lose a little bit of damage at the start of when you're engaging enemies.
What kind of gear would you say is essential for this build?
If you want to survive, I would say the Sappercom is essential. Other than that, I'd say the anointment is the more essential thing than the guns themselves. If you can get decent enough weapons with high magazine size, you'll be able to tackle most things. So like I said, you can use the Hellshock, you can use the Bitch, which are weapons that aren't in the top tier of the kind of meta weapons at the moment, and you'll still be absolutely fine. So if you can't get your hands on it, or you might not have got the DLC, there are still other viable options.
Are there any specific roles that you consider ideal as a class-specific passive on the mod?
So ideally, I would go for damage for a weapon damage, SMG damage. So I've got weapon damage, SMG damage, and assault rifle damage, which is brilliant. But if you couldn't get that because it's a really good role and I spend far too much time farming, then you could go for maybe a weapon damage. And if you're using a flipper, you could do Malawan damage or SMG damage.
Okay.
You don't really need to have like a shield buff or a health regen. So I would say you don't need those. But in replace of those, you could have a magazine size 50%, which plays into the build.
Excellent. All right. What kind of mayhem modifiers do you prefer?
So I'm a little bit nutty when it comes to the modifiers for Moze. So the really difficult modifier is the one that I have the most trouble with. So I like buddy system, but it doesn't really... It's a bit annoying, buddy system. Everyone finds that a little bit annoying. So I actually go for the one that's hard in the head. I can't remember what it's specifically called, but the one that debuffs critical hit damage. So we're getting ammunition from getting those critical hits. We'll lose a bit of damage, but because the flipper is like in a circular, like just like a, I don't know how you would describe it, just like a mesh of bullets hitting the, most of those mesh probably won't hit the head anyway. So we'll just add damage and we'll just power through that loss of the critical hit damage and just still be able to absolutely mow through things. And we're not actually losing anything anyway, because even though we've lost damage off the crit, we've not actually used that ammo, so we'll just fire another bullet. Eventually they'll die. That would be the hard modifier. I really like Speed Demon. Not a lot of people know, but Speed Demon actually applies to Iron Bear as well. So if you want to be in a tank and be super, super zoomy, you can use Iron Bear and Speed Demon together, and it makes really funny noises when Iron Bear goes really fast. And then I use Ticked Off, which I normally would avoid, but we don't do a lot of dot damage. Anyway, we're only usually really using the dot damage to keep the pump charged. So it's actually quite a nice one to have. And then probably the other modifier that I would probably kind of look for would maybe be an immunity to a flavor that I would never use, for example. Like I could probably go for an immunity for cryo and then just make sure that my weapons aren't anywhere near cryo, and then there would never be a problem.
What grenade mod do you use?
So the grenade mod that we use is the Cloning Maddening Tracker with the On-Grenade Thrown Anointment, which is pretty much the go-to for Moze. And the On-Grenade Thrown is in my opinion, the perfect anointment. We don't really need action skill end bonus 50% on our Cloning Maddening Tracker, because we're going to be throwing our grenade much more frequently than we are jumping into in and out of Iron Bear to get that 50%.
And that's a purple mod. Where can we find that?
So you can get that from vending machines. You can get that from world drops. So you need to be quite observant when purples drop on the floor. I know people just tend to go for the legendaries, but you can get them from any source, basically, from a chest, from an ammo box, anywhere.
Fantastic. And you mentioned earlier you prefer the Transformer. Is that the shield that you usually use?
Yeah, so the Transformer is probably my go-to option. Now, there are some alternatives that have cropped up since DLC and the Guardian Takedown. So the Stinger Shield, which procs from Anathema, which is the halfway boss in the Guardian Takedown, that does a Nova that's based on melee, which works really well with the new Guardian ranks, which works with Groundbreaker. So Groundbreaker, how it works is that Groundbreaker, if you do a melee damage, it will calculate all the damage that you've done over the last 5 seconds and give you 25% of that through your melee as free damage. So basically, if your shield gets damaged and breaks, that Nova will go off, and that's free damage that you wouldn't have done. So if someone runs up to you and punches you in the Guardian Takedown, breaks your shield, and I've just done 1,000,000 damage to somebody so far away, I'll hit that guy who's just melee'd me for 250,000 damage.
Wow.
It's very good.
Badass. Would you say this build would work if you don't have the proper weapons and gear yet?
Definitely. So that when you're going through the story, you probably won't have access to anointments yet because you'll need to get through to the mayhems and stuff. Mm-hmm. But that's not going to stop the ammunition from regenning. That's not going to stop the fact that you'll still get your health steal and things like that. So you'll still get that concoction mixture if you use a radiation, or you say, for instance, you use a hell shock, which is shock. You'll still get that bonus incendiary through the skill tree. So you'll still get all of that, but it becomes a perfect storm when you get to Mayhem 10 and you start adding these pieces together.
You mentioned earlier a couple of different weapons that we could use instead if you don't have the best weapons for the build. What would be a suitable stopgap until I have the optimal loot needed?
So the Hell Shock would be my first choice.
Okay.
That would definitely be the weapon I would go and try and get if I didn't have access to the DLCs yet, or I didn't have access to endgame. The bitch would definitely be another. You could get weapons like the Monarch, for example, but you need to be on Mayhem 6 to get the Monarch.
Okay.
But anything with a semi-decent large magazine size and a decent enough fire rate, you'll be absolutely fine. The Lucian's Call is a really good example of that. That has just been buffed. So really? The Lucian's Call comes back into play, and it does splash damage, which Moze buffs.
Interesting. Another player enters the field. I like it.
Yeah.
What Guardian rank talents would you say a player should focus on to get the most bonus stats for this build?
So in terms of Guardian ranks, there are a couple of things that work really well. So there's in the Survivor skill, basically when you recover from Fight for Your Life, you get health and shield. So on the off chance that you come down, you actually do get knocked down, you can use that, which is really nice. There is another skill called Shield Reboot. When you kill an enemy, starts shield regeneration. That's really nice as well. So you're going to find at times that because of the way that the enemies are firing at you in the takedowns, you're probably going to have a lot of time with no shield, but your health will never actually go down because you're just doing that much damage and getting that much health regen. Right. But it's nice to have a skill like Shield Reboot, which means that at the first opportunity, your shields start to recharge. Awesome.
What Guardian rank talents, if any, should a player disable to use this build?
So there are none that you need to disable with this build. We don't have any problems with whether you're on PC or on console with on frame rates, or there are no dangerous perks that will do more than harm than good.
All right, fantastic. When spending a Guardian token, what are the stats players should focus on spending their tokens on to obtain maximum min-max potential?
Pretty much all the damage ones in the Enforcer areas, I would definitely recommend. Shield capacity if you wanted to, but as I said before, with this particular type of build, your shield's probably going to get hammered quite a lot, but you'll never actually lose health. So you could maybe do your maximum health, which would be really nice, or a recoil reduction might be pretty good because you're constantly going to be using that gun and holding the trigger down. So recoil reduction might be nice as well.
Especially if you're using a controller. Do you use a controller?
Yes, I do. It's
okay,
beautiful.
I mean, recoil would be very, very useful for controller users. I know K6 uses a controller as well.
Yes.
So
yes.
Not so important for PC users, just a side note.
Yeah.
Bounty of Blood introduced 3 new talents in the Guardian rank tree: Groundbreaker, Dead Man Walking, and Lead or Alive. If you had to pick one to focus on getting first for this build, which one would it be and why?
100% Groundbreaker.
Okay.
100% Groundbreaker. If we were to switch to use the Stinger Shield, which I do quite often in this build, so the Maliwan takedown, I would use the Transformer 100% because there's lots of enemies that shoot you. But you go to the Guardian takedown, they're actually quite a lot of the time enemies that want to get up close and personal. They do want to do melee to you. That will proc the Stinger all the time. So we will do free damage to all of those enemies around there. So I would probably go Groundbreaker and I would use the Stinger. Now, if I didn't use that, then both of the other skills are incredible. Extended fight for life while you are still and having your guns reloaded are both really good as well. So it's a real tough choice between the 3. But for my personal preference, because I love the Stinger Shield so much, I'd go for Groundbreaker.
Cool. How did you test this build?
So the build was made for Guardian Takedown, so we just threw it in there, to be honest with you. So we completed the Guardian Takedown first time without any issues. We went back after that and picked up a couple of other weapons for certain scenarios. So a consecutive hits light shell was really nice in shock at times, just to have that for some of the enemies that were weak to shock. But that being said, it was made for Guardian Takedown, so we just took it to Guardian Takedown. And there were some nice things. So I went off and farmed for a corrosive flipper with next 2 mags corrosive, just so I could just chew through those armor bars really quickly. But other than that, we just chucked it straight in there and it did fine.
Oh, what were some of your initial impressions when you first tested the build?
Basically, it's really easy to play. So those of you who remember Zane of All Trades, it was a not real think about it, just play, just enjoy yourself. So I kind of like to shape my builds and my channel around the in-between gamer, not quite a beginner, not quite a hardcore player, but somebody who just wants to pick up the game and shoot things. And with this build, you don't really have to think about too much. You can interchange the weapons what you like, and you can just play, and everything just dies in front of you.
Oh, I can't wait to try it. What did the numbers look like compared to similar builds, both ones that you've crafted and ones you've seen other community members display?
So in terms of the next 2 mags build, there's only 2 builds that I can compare it to. K6 has a Hellzerker build, which is extremely good, and one of my favorite builds I ever used. That it kind of it does the same job essentially. You jump out of Iron Bear and you've capped the green tree, so you're never going to run out of ammo, and it works really well. The other build is another build that I did on my YouTube channel, Mega Magmos. Same premise, but that one was purely about just never running out of ammunition and just giving you that safety net of there's just absolutely no way you can die, because we gave you more shields and more health regen. This one took more risks when we made it by taking away some of the shield regens and just focusing on the damage. But actually, it turned out we were just still as fine in terms of survivability.
Fantastic. Do you feel that there are any changes that Gearbox can make to the game that would further refine this build without making it drastically over or underpowered?
So I think there are some mathematical issues with firing the scav extend in the skill tree, in that it's being boosted quite a lot. So we're getting some bonus incendiary damage that I'm not sure we were designed to. So I think at some point that will probably be patched out. So we might lose a smidge of incendiary damage there. But I think in terms of the way that Moze is set up now, she has incredibly interesting class mods. She's probably one of the most diverse characters. You can do so many things with her, and she's definitely my second favorite Vault Hunter now. There's just, all her builds are completely different. And when Borderlands 3 was first released, it was a girl that had a tank And now that tank feels like a tank. She can do serious damage with it, and it can survive pretty well as well.
Cool. Who's your favorite Vault Hunter?
Yeah, I'm a Zane main.
Ah. I guess that's it. Unfortunately, thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there a build that you can maybe take 15 seconds to tease for your next appearance?
So I know we've just done a Moze, but a few weeks ago, we took a shield that has a 30,000 capacity and took it to 500,000. So we had Moze at 500,000 shields.
Wow. That's
she's
insane.
called Shield. She's called Shield Maiden Moze. So maybe once the rotation's gone through Vault Hunters, we'll come back with it.
Another Moze. We've had 2 Mozes in a row so far. So we'll have to see what else we've got on the other characters. I know Moze is a fantastically strong character, but we'll come back to that. So cool. Next time. I can't wait. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the show. And thank you so much, Triple G, for joining us. Triple G, where can we find you on the internet?
So my YouTube is Triple G. My Twitch is triple_GZ. Same as my Twitter, triple_GZ, but with a 1. And I stream 5 times a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So you can find me on Twitch.
Fantastic. So the build might be called GT Shorty, but clearly you'll leave long swaths of destruction in your wake. The amount of damage you do and the convenience of not having to reload at any point is absolutely incredible. And the icing on the cake, 3 elements in 1 shot. We're showing a new perspective on how Moze can be built to maximum destruction. I dub once more an ultimate Vault Hunter.
Thank you very much.
Guardian Takedown and Bounty of Blood are both out now, so give GT Shorty a try and let us know the results via your favorite social media platform. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Thursday, September 3rd on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and SoundCloud at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. If you'd like more details about this build, you can find a link to more information and the build in the podcast description section. Happy looting to all you ultimate Vault Hunters out there.